Hi everyone, and welcome back again to Haunted Hearsay. I'm here again with Ben. Hi Ben.
Hi, how are you?
Is there still in lockdown in Dublin? Yeah.
We are indeed.
Yeah, same here in Donegal. Yes, I read a bit. I heard a bit of a strange tale in the news the other day. You were referencing it, and you have a bit of a story about it.
Shane Gibbons from West Clare, and he was basically up in court for assaulting his girlfriend. And there's like multiple eyewitnesses of her being in like basically possessed, and being in a catatonic state. The court case was thrown out, um, which
Wait,
is
so this guy was arrested for hitting his
You
partner.
see, the annoying thing about the article is it doesn't actually mention why he was arrested or any of that, but it talks about the I suppose the people that were witnesses, and there
Neighbors, most likely, or something,
was
or
a priest and a lady in a shop, and I don't know the usual suspects or whatever. But it's quite he was saying that there was a lot of poltergeist activity. Tons of stuff happened to him. Lights would turn on and off.
in the house that he's in.
Yeah, and scary thing, and she'd start more about her is, I suppose, is more interesting, is that she'd start speaking in Latin as well. So she'd go into this is a real woman that's out there and has a job, and she's not named in the article. The guy is Shane Gibbons is his name.
And what does he do?
He's a businessman. He's got kids. So I don't know if I don't know. It's
So to
he
get let me get it straight. So
the boss.
he's been arrested. We don't know exactly for sure for what, but
Yeah,
part of it was
she
for
had
assaulting a
bruises.
girlfriend who he says he didn't
The
assault,
article mentions that she has bruises and various scratches and that sort of thing.
and they're both
So
claiming that it
I
was
was thinking someone must have. Now it's brilliant that I just want to reiterate it's good that he ended up in court and they went through the due process and found out that he didn't do it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
That's very important to say. But I do think after all that happened, it's very rare you come across one of these stories in a news article, even if it is a
Well, it's the most outrageous excuse I've ever heard. If it's an excuse, I
yeah,
did at my
exactly.
partner. She was possessed by a
But
demon.
she'd just probably say no, I'm not possessed, or if like, and it does mention mental health issues in the a clear distinction between it being a mental health issue and it being what is commonly known as like possession. And uh, there was a priest that saw it firsthand. There was like
Right. Okay.
a, I'm just
So there
gonna
was independent witnesses. It's not
there was
just these two people
multiple. There
saying
was
this.
an exorcist and a separate healer. There was four or five. He did everything he could to exorcise her. That's why it's really scary. They
Now
cut.
that does sound really scary. At first,
They,
when I first heard this, I thought it was this is the most outrageous excuse I've ever heard. You know,
yeah, yeah, no.
walk into a cupboard, that kind of,
A lot of people. So there's a few things. One, he isn't. I suppose he is a businessman. He describes himself as kind of like a skeptic.
Where
Before
does he lives again? Claire?
County Clare, yeah, East Clare.
Where's
Um,
Claire from here? That's a long, long way from
well,
Claire.
it's not that far. It's Galway, I think.
Right.
Uh,
Wow. Now that is pretty scary. And did it say anything about the house that they were in? Was it a new house they moved into, or is it an old house, or
didn't really go into it. Like from my memory, it didn't. We can put the article down in the comments below, or in the description.
yeah, it'd be nice to find out a bit more about that.
It
That's
sounds like
that's
it's
that's really quite scary. And it's not, I mean, if I'm being truthful, it's not the first time I've heard of an exorcist in Ireland. You
no,
know
no.
this, I've told you this before.
Reading about
I
it's
was- Yeah, I
interesting.
was very, very surprised to hear that we had them based here and that we had them based here because of the rise in satanic cults in the country.
Say that again. Sorry, I interrupted
The
you.
reason that we had them based here, like an exorcist appointed by the Pope, was because of the rise in satanic cults in the country.
Oh, okay.
Uh, There's a place in Belfast known as the Cave Hill. It's a big area of cliffs and woodland area that overlooks Belfast. And years ago now, I don't know about in recent years, but I know now, like in say previous like 10, 15 years ago, there was evidences of rituals and masses being held in various locations on this cave hill that were supposedly to do with Satanism and things like that as well. But I was
So,
very
so the,
surprised to hear that I was told by a priest who was an exorcist, who was appointed by the Pope, and that there was a lot more all over Ireland than you would like to think. And I was very surprised when I heard that because it's not something you stop across here.
yeah.
Maybe starting to hear a lot more about it now with all the
That's the thing. Like you don't come across it much, but you never know how prevalent it is because
yeah.
this seems like a very normal day-to-day experience that these people are like in their very normal lives, and then this happens, kind of thing. Uh,
Yeah.
and in the article, the guy says that like you could work with this lady because they keep her anonymous, but he's like anyone reading this could be her workmate and not know that she goes into these catatonic states where she's speaking in Latin and scratching herself. And
That's the same with that woman I was telling you about in Rome, the architect.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That elderly gentleman who's since passed, that he
Or
was exercising. I mean, you were looking at a well-to-do middle-class family, and these people, they weren't kids, that
yeah, and they're probably not
and
open.
not, exactly, and they believed wholeheartedly, and the church was there with them as well. So
Yeah,
things like that are happening, and I don't know, are they happening more, or is it just with all the media, we're finding out more these days? There's nothing really can be hidden anymore.
that's true.
We have so much access to pop. Everyone does now, basically worldwide.
Yeah, these guys went off to America then to get her exercised after they tried in Ireland. So I think that seemed to do the
So
trick.
this is recently now in County
Yeah,
Clare,
a couple of months ago, it
and
says.
they've gone to the States since then to get her exercised.
Oh, so the court case was a couple of. Oh, let me see. The court case was a couple of weeks ago, I think. Uh,
Right, okay.
sorry, August. So causing harm in August.
Wow. And since then they've gone to the States to have her.
They went to the parish priest, and then they went to a bigger exorcist in Ireland, and then they went to another healer in Kerry, and then they went to the States. And she seems to be grand, but they're not a couple anymore. They were together for 3 years. Even
I don't think I can blame him on this one. I
I'm
definitely don't.
surprised he stuck with her at all.
But yeah, I thought when you first mentioned it to me, I thought this is the
Oh, you'd
most.
be gone though. You'd run away from that shit if she started speaking Latin. Like seriously, you would. You'd be
I'm
gone.
packed. I'm out of here. It was nice knowing you.
Well, like I'll help, but we're never sharing a bed again. Like
I'll give them the family a ring for you, and
you're now a
you can
human.
imagine. Well, I have a story as well tonight. Like the back of Errigal, that stretch of road heading towards Termon before you
To
come to
go
the
back,
weekend.
but I do know it. I'm sure I've been on it 100 million
Yeah,
times, but I
it's
will
it's a
never.
very
I don't
desolate
go.
and lonely stretch of road, but it's notoriously haunted. Now, there's no, all different conflicting act, but there's an awful lot of things that have happened there in the past. Those mountains would have been part of the Glenveigh National Park. And in Glenveigh, as we know, just after the famine, the biggest evictions that ever took place anywhere took place in one day in Glenveigh in those mountains, where 280 people were all evicted and made homeless in the one day. Patrick Gallagher from Goatstone Shave wrote a song about it, actually. It was a terrible tragedy. Those people would have left, and the ones that didn't go to the poorhouse or didn't have other family to go to would have boarded ships and probably sailed to America. They would have had no choice. As I say, or ended up in the poorhouse. So there's that element there for a start. John George Adair, who owned the Glenveigh National Park at the time, was a Scottish man and very cruel and didn't like the Irish, treated them very badly. There's that. God knows what happened in and around the castle when he had it. But there's also stories. There's an area at the back there's an area at the back of Errigal, and it's like a halfway spot, and it was called Slasher Sweeney's. And Slasher Sweeney's is actually at the crossroads as you're going to Falcara as well. And Slasher Sweeney's was actually relatives. My grandfather, my Granda Sweeney, God rest his soul, remembers his uncle cycling out to visit with them. They were first cousins of
Right.
Slasher Sweeney.
Right.
And what Slasher Sweeney, by the way, if there's any Americans just tuning in at all, sounds really ominous, but it isn't. It's where people stopped to have a slash and maybe a cup of tea. It was a halfway stop, coming from the mountains. If you were coming from Letterkenny, heading into Gweedore or heading into the Rosses, it was a halfway stop. But as I say, my grandfather could remember people going out there, like his uncle going out, cycling out, etc. His father died young in the Spanish flu. I've told you that before. And so there was a connection. So people was coming. It was often, if it was a bad night, people were traveling back, say, from Letterkenny. That would have been near enough a 2-day walk back then.
Mm-hmm.
They'd most likely stay there for B&B. It was a halfway house. There was another house further down, two-story house, and that was also a guest house. A lot of people mix that one up with the actual Black House, the one, but that no longer exists. It's further along. That's the story I'm actually going to tell you. And this one, I can't remember the name of the family. I did hear the name before. It's over 20 years ago when I first started doing this story, gathering the information in this story. But the family in there, as I say, they would do B&B as well. If it was bad nights and say Slashers was really full and, once carrying on down, would stay there. And the story goes, there was a young girl that was in helping the lady of the house keep the house. And she arrived one morning and she comes through the kitchen area and there's a staircase that goes upstairs into the house. And she saw a gentleman on the stairs and she said, "Good morning, sir," and acknowledged him. And he never said anything and he carried on up the stairs. And so she went out and she found the lady of the house. "What do you want me to start doing? I see you have a guest here from last night." And she says, "No, we don't have anybody in." And there's a man just went up the stairs. So they run into the house, go up the stairs, no man there. So it turns out, I don't know who this man was, but he was appearing to people for a long time. And even if you stop there now, the house, the windows are boarded up. Oh my God, it's really scary. I used to stop with my youngest son, Jamie, and his friends for Halloween and birthdays. I would purposely take them out and find the house and scare the living daylights out of them because it has that kind of atmosphere about it. So I don't know who it was that haunted that house. But the reason I'm telling that story first is because that particular time, it's around the same time, maybe after it, there was people known to go missing. And it's like people that would maybe headed away with cattle wanting to sell them and maybe Letterkenny or going out to sell somewheres in Letterkenny or to buy something. They would disappear. And in those days, no phones, no writing, etc. So they would just either assume, something either bad befell them or they maybe just kept going and hopped on a boat and went away somewhere. But people didn't know, but they knew. But the scary thing was that the last time people were being seen, it was leaving Slasher Sweeney's. That would be the last time people would say, "We seen such and such."
Okay.
Or it would be, they'd be seen before they'd come to Slasher Sweeney's, but apparently would never make it to Slasher Sweeney's. So there was always that sort of, that kind of people started to be a bit wary. And as I've said it before about crime, like your ordinary run-of-the-mill crime, wasn't acknowledged the same way here. Certainly not by the British occupation here, unless it was addressed to them or unless it had anything to do with them. But there was a house further down, and this house was known as the Black House. And I think it was actually called the Black House because that was the name of the people. I'm not 100% on that, but the house was actually down where they straightened out a part of the road. It used to be on a corner and it was knocked down. I did actually take pictures of the ruins of it before they cleared it away completely because I knew they were making the road wider at the time. It was actually a guy called Conall Duffy in Annigra who first put me onto the story. And at that time, he was working for RTE and Radio McGaeltacht. And he had heard the story from a woman called Veronica McBride, who was an Irish writer here in Gweedore. She's since passed away. And so I called her and we got speaking. And I remember, because I always remember saying, your grandfather would know more about the story than me, probably. But it was her that gave me the background to this story, and as much as she could do. And what it was, there was the two brothers and a sister that lived anyway where they were. It turns out I think they were bad uns. And the people that were going missing were getting mugged and getting hit hard across the head and
They were the
whatever.
ones that were dying.
But they had a nephew who had emigrated to America, probably just after the famine or whatever, but he had gone to America. He'd been out there for about 10, 15 years. He was traveling home. Now, what we don't know is whether he was traveling home on holiday or whether he was moving home to live. But he certainly was coming home, having done well for himself, in America. And when he arrived in Southampton, he changed boats in Southampton, and he would have been sailing probably then, I'd say, from Liverpool to Derry. On that journey, on the journey from England over, he made friends with a group of soldiers that were on the boat, and he told them he'd been in the States, etc. And they told him they were going to do a tour in Burton Port at the Coast Guard station there. That's where they were heading. So when he got to Derry, instead of having to get the Derry train, which would have taken him to Burton Port, well, he would have taken him to Gweedore as well. That was when the train was still running here in Donegal. To anyone from America listening, we don't have trains in Donegal. They were all ripped out.
And when the
Years ago,
50s.
we never rebuilt them, but that's another story. But so they offered him a lift, so they gave him a lift, and the junction where Slasher Sweeney's is where they've dropped him off. So he would have walked the rest of the way then to the uncles and the aunts. And so apparently, whatever it was, 6 months later, whatever, the English soldiers were going back. And because they'd travelled with them from England, had made friends with them, and they'd all exchanged names or whatever, they decided they were going to stop and call in on him and see how, is he still going to live there, etc. Whatever. They decided they were going to visit him. And they went to the house that they were told to. And if you've ever been in the back of Errigal, there only are a handful of houses. And even then, there was only a handful of houses. So it wasn't hard to find it. This actual house now has been knocked down. But they went to the house and they asked after the nephew. But they weren't, the two brothers and the sister weren't smart enough, because they were like, what nephew? No, he never arrived here. And they were like, look, we gave him a lift. We are the ones that gave him a lift. He's obviously not told them, possibly because it might have caused a bit of friction, to accepting a lift and befriending English soldiers at a time the place was occupied. It mightn't have gone down well. So he's obviously not told them. But so they've got a bit suspicious, and a couple of the other soldiers have got off the truck and they're kind of wandering about the house, and they seen what appeared to be a newly dug area, the back garden. Oh. And whenever the two brothers and sister insisted that no nephew had come near them, that he was in America, they went round, and sure didn't they find him buried in the back garden. Yeah. And then they got suspicious about other patches of ground that didn't look that old either. And they dug up 9 graves. Wow. They actually went away that day. They arrested them and took them to the Kirch Hotel.
What year was this?
I'm not sure. It was
after the famine.
It would have been around the start of the 1900s. It would have been around that time, the start of the 1900s. And that was literally, I'm trying to think now. I know that they took them to the Kirch. This I was able to follow up. They took them to the Kirch, which is now a hotel. But that was a hotel then, but it was being occupied by the British soldiers and used as a barracks. So they were taken there first, and soldiers came back the following day and knocked that house to the ground. They dug up the 9 bodies. Of course, there was no ID with them. No one to say who it was. And those bodies were taken to the Pauper Cemetery in Fulcara and reinterred in one grave there.
All in the same
grave. And so there's those poor souls that probably wandered the back of that road that never got home or never got where they were supposed to be going. So there's a lot of people say that those ghosts are there. There's lots of different, but I think those ghosts were there way before these murders happened. Yeah. Now, what I was able to find out about these murders is that they took them then from the Kirch to Burton Port, to the Coast Guard station in Burton Port. And I got that much information, and I went to the sergeant in Burton Port at the time, the Garda sergeant in Burton Port, and got speaking to him and said, how would I go about finding out where they sent them? He says, well, they were most likely tried in Burton Port. We don't know. And then if they were sentencing them to, say, Kilmainham jail or wherever the jails were, it would have been down the country. So they would have sent them by convoy. But there was the reason there's no actual records after that is because when the occupation of the British was over here in the Republic of Ireland, specifically more so in Donegal than in a lot of other places up this part of the country. But all the buildings that the British occupied were either burned down or destroyed. The Coast Guard station was burned out, and all the records in there were destroyed. But
Mm.
then ahead, then in the Rising, the rest of the records that would have been in the Records Hall in Dublin Castle were
That got burnt. Yeah.
so the only thing is that the English were notorious for keeping things in triplicate. So it would be possible. Now, when I was doing the story 20 years ago, you had to put an application into the British Imperial War Museum and say why you wanted that information. And it was a whole hullabaloo. I think I remember sending them off a letter and I didn't get a response. Nowadays, I'm sure you could probably do it all
Or you
online.
send an email and they'd reply the same day.
I'm sure you could probably. So I never got as far. The guards couldn't even help me with that in the end up.
Mm.
So yeah, the three of them were taken to Burton Port to the Coast Guards, and wherever they went after that, then I'm not. They could have even been shot.
Go to the port in the summer and walk down the railway. It's nice. You can.
Yeah, it's a beautiful spot down there.
I
And
lost the
it's
phone
just,
there
see,
once.
Bartsport was a gateway, and so from the sea, it was easy. It was deep waters. It was easier to get into. I mean, well, you get in as far as the islands, and wee boats would meet you then before they dredged the actual harbour. But I just think of the nine poor souls that were lost at the back of Errigal, and that their families probably thought that they'd just taken whatever money they had or whatever cattle they had and just absconded and didn't know that they'd been set afoul and were lying in an unmarked grave
There's
in
a
Garrett.
story behind each one of them.
Yeah, exactly. So that they're just two of the situations for either the evictions or those murders that are reasons that area could be haunted. But I say it goes back a lot further to when the Numidians were here.
Mm.
And it's up around this area, right in, well, Forest would have stopped them coming in too far from the actual sea. And
Yeah.
that's we spoke about them before when I was talking in Samhain
Yeah.
about Mermaid and the Numidians. And there was over 2,000 of them lost here during a pandemic. So this is all the same area,
Mm.
so yeah, I think there's been a lot of loss, a lot of tragedy,
Yeah.
and could be any number of reasons why there's people haunting that stretch of road.
Yeah.
But it was nothing to do with Slasher Sweeney's. That was my relatives. We were just there. We were
And they're not
very bright.
slashers.
Yeah.
They're not
And
slashers.
nothing to do with the lovely wee two-story house beside it. That still stands there. I think I've shown you a picture of that. That's still there, and they have the windows covered up, and it's still like it's very picturesque, but very spooky. And that house was haunted long before those murders took place. So I don't know who's haunting that. Some poor soul that never made it home, maybe, and he just got as far as the halfway house and
Yeah.
repeating his last night over and over. You don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought those were stories worth telling. But we
Definitely.
have something really exciting coming up now for Thursday.
Yeah. Tell. Pray
And
tell.
yeah, we've been doing a bit of background on ghosts in Letterkenny, and there was one I remember delving into years ago. I was lucky enough to have a part as an extra in the film The Hanging Gale. And there was some filming done up in a house in just outside Letterkenny. I always assumed that was the house that we're going to be talking about on Thursday. Turns out it's not. That's just another haunted house. So I'll need to get back to that one again. But we stumbled on the story of another one here in Letterkenny. So without saying anything, I want people really to tune in for this one. So it's like what connects the Beatles, fairy forts, curses, murder, suicide pacts, ghosts, poltergeist activity, and Eric Clapton. So if you would like to find out, you'll need to come back
Yeah.
on Thursday. And
And
that
this
is
is going to
such
be a
a
big
good
one.
story. It's such a juicy
See.
story. And it's a local story. Exactly, it's a local story. So we have all the information for that and some great pictures. We also have an interview with a resident from the estate beside where we will be talking about. And so yeah, we've got a lot to cover on that. I'm looking forward to doing that. So I
That
think I
is
think we've
Thursday.
covered enough this evening. So we'll leave all the rest for Thursday. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think that's good. Um,
Anything you want to add before we say goodnight to everyone?
no, I'm just really excited about. I'm just about that this one on Thursday.
So am I. This is a really juicy one. And if you want to see, I mean, this is a really good
There's a
go.
lot going on there in the link.
Yep.
So, okay.
Okay, listen, everybody, thank you, and
Thanks so much,
see you
guys.
hopefully Thursday. Cheerio.